Our guest today joins us from sunny Southern California. He has spent his entire career at the intersection of customer service and analytics. And as he first earned his stripes at Accenture for over a decade, he then went all in, like many of us do, so to speak, on becoming an entrepreneur, founding, you probably guessed it, a customer service analytics company. After 5 years of grinding away in the dirt, he's now able to share some awesome stories about the depth of his journey with us. So without further ado, founder and CEO of serviceMob, Anuj Bhalla, welcome.
Hey, Jim, welcome. Welcome. I'm welcoming me new to your own podcast, but I'm glad to be here. So thanks so much for having me, and really excited about this talk today.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. So I obviously gave my surface level intro of who you are, but take us a little deeper, right? What is it that you really do at serviceMob?
Well, we are a customer service analytics company. Customer service, it's we all know it. We probably all hate it for certain reasons, but it's a necessary evil. I think someone once said, there's three certainties in life, like death, taxes, and I think a distant third is customer service. We all have to deal with it, right? I mean, if you're rich, poor, it doesn't matter your status, doesn't matter where you are in the world. Customer service is kind of everywhere. And as a result of that, and the way that our economy in the world is really going, we're much more of a service economy now than we've ever been, especially in the United States, increasingly so in the world. A necessary corollary to that is that customer service is just going to become bigger and bigger, and it is, right? I think more and more we need help with the products and services we buy and purchase. But on top of that, I think an interesting kind of tailwind behind this whole world of customer service is really kind of on the backdrop of, remote working and the pandemic. I think more and more there's an increase in demand for remote services, right? The way we buy a car is different now more than ever, right? A lot more of that, servicing, and a lot more of that front office, or at least tip of the spear work, is done over the phone or over chat, over email. The nature of how consumers and businesses interact have increased in channel, right? So, we're going now to social media. We're using SMS a lot more. We are using things like community forums that companies create to engage their customers and community, and using that as a forum to really provide service. So there's a lot of different newer avenues than the traditional call center that we were used to, although calls still tend to dominate for most industries, right? It's interesting, even in the digital era, we still haven't gotten off the phone, so to speak. And maybe that's because our phones are now supercomputers. They're much more capable than just dialing a number. And with that, there's an interesting opportunity in terms of how service is delivered. But as that's evolved, the way that we measure, the health of an operation, the way we measure the health of a business, is often still relegated toward the old ways of the traditional contact center. And so, that's where we saw a market inefficiency. That's where we saw, the way we do analytics, the way we measure the health of an operation has not really caught up to the many ways that businesses and consumers can now interact. Right. And that was really kind of the genesis of what serviceMob was really all about. So that's why I created this company. But in my days at Accenture, we were helping a lot of big companies solve this exact problem. Just because on the surface, it sounds straightforward, but when you take into account all the different systems that make customer service work, all the different channels on which you can interact, you now have this multivalent, omnivalent ecosystem that becomes harder and harder to track.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up your background at Accenture, right? For those that don't know, Accenture is one of the best consulting groups on the planet, and you were in their strategy practice and did a lot with analytics and customer service. And I mean, you've done it all with them at one of the biggest companies on the planet at solving these problems. What made you leave I'll just call it a cushy enterprise lifestyle, right? With someone else paying the bills to go all in on yourself and start ServiceMob?
I don't know. I think I hit my head at some point.
Haven't we
It's an
all?
interesting question because I think, people think of the dorm room entrepreneurs, and there's definitely, I think about my career and wonder, could I have started this earlier? Definitely there could have been opportunities, but I think every, experience that I had at Accenture was gold. And I think at the end of the day, I needed to go through those to really find the future opportunity for my own career. I wasn't the dorm room entrepreneur. I was at Accenture for about 12 years, did my MBA at MIT, and focused in on a lot of things analytics while I was there. I also used it as a dress rehearsal in some ways of, what if I was to start a business? Like, what would it be? And, I think we tend to, go toward our domain expertise. For me, the domain expertise is actually something I kind of love. And I don't think a lot of people will admit that they love customer service. But let me convince you, right? Why I like it so much is that I think it's an untapped area of the enterprise. I think the heartbeat of every company, at scale, at some level, is going to go through that customer service department. And why I say that is because, different than maybe, supply chain or accounting or like any other HR, those all have their virtues and importance for business capabilities. But I think service is truly one of those areas where, the rubber meets the road. This is where you hear from the voice of the customer. It's a data-rich area of the business. And it's probably one of the more underserved areas, right? And generally, the reason for that is that traditionally it was never thought of as a revenue center, right? So, in the analytics world, marketing, sales, customer loyalty, customer experience, as we call it, a lot of that had a little bit more love because, I think of the direct relationship to top line metrics, right? And customer service, generally was thought of as a cost center. So, in a lot of ways, it was less sexy, as a piece of the business than maybe sales or marketing. But it's where you really hear about customers. It's really where you really get the attitudes they have about your brand. It's where you really get to gauge a little bit more about that relationship between your business and the customer. And frankly, it's going to inform a lot more about that health of the relationship over the long term. So when we think about churn, when we think about like lifetime value, when you think about average revenue per user, there's a lot more that has to be said about, having good service and how that impacts those, key levers than even some of the other metrics or other capabilities that are out there in the enterprise, like sales or marketing. Marketing is great to get, new customers in, but for the existing customers you have, it's all about relationships and every passive and active interaction that you have with the brand matters. It does matter, and it does affect things. And it's very interesting to see how those interactions and how that psychology really plays into the decisions customers ultimately make. One thing that I will say for service, an analogy I like to give sometimes is, if you think of a good restaurant, right? If you go to a restaurant with the best food in the world, Jim, and you walk in with your family and they treat you like dirt, are you going back there? It may be the best food, but you might not go back because that service wasn't so great. Versus, maybe a place with okay food, but hey, when you're there, they treat you like family and, they give you some extras, a little extra dessert or something, they're nice to your kids, whatever it is, that might be a place you go back to and they might earn your business again and again. And so, the point there is that, the product definitely matters. There's no way around that's important, but a lot more of why customers decide to stay or switch with a brand has to do with service. And I think, that's still a relatively under analyzed part of the business. And that's precisely why we wanted to go into this space.
For tech companies, a lot of people think of that as customer success, right? And the evolution of customer service into, or account management into customer success. And I, that's a constant conversation I'm having. And I'm just curious, is that something that you're often talking about with some of your customers and your peers? Is, what is customer success and what is customer service?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the last 10 years, there's been somewhat of a bifurcation of success versus service.
Right.
I think of it as the post-sale, like, post-sale, you are now a customer, right?
Right.
Before I might be marketing to a prospect, but not a customer yet. We market to get the sale, right? Once we get the sale, you are a customer. And now that you're a customer, we now have to, figure out how do we work with you post-sale to make sure that you're successful. So I see, success as a, as an umbrella term, for the post sale, and really that, in my opinion, I think it's come to mean a few different things, right? I think sometimes with service, we tend to think of it as just like, kind of the real-time support, that kind of thing, versus success.
Yeah.
Success is maybe more of the ongoing relationship, right? It's hey, like, let me check in with you every week or every couple of weeks just to make sure things are going good, even if nothing is wrong, versus, service has a little bit more of a reactive, respond react kind of mentality, right? If, hey, when something goes wrong, are you able to take care of me? Both are incredibly important. I think with us at serviceMob, we decided to kind of double down on kind of the real-time service aspect of it, right? Just because that's a little bit more acute. And I think the truth is, as a startup, you don't want to be too broad, but you don't want to be too narrow either, right? And I think, customer success, in a lot of ways, people see that as an extension. And like I said, other groups getting more love. I think success definitely does, have, more tools, more things, that measurements and things like that, software that people are using to help manage that business is nowhere nearly as high throughput as service. So when you talk about like the number of interactions and success, that might be, a phone call a week or a month or something like that you're doing to check in on a customer, versus, service, I think, is, wow, we're getting like tens of thousands of contacts every week or every day, even depending on the size of your operation. And I think that physics problem of service is really, a challenging one, right? And that's why I think a lot of companies haven't gone to that space. So we kind of deliberately decided not to really go to success, because there's some great companies in that space that are doing awesome things. Like, Gainsight is one, that comes to mind, where, again, they try to like really put a lot of the numbers around it, really put a lot of them, how do we manage, some of these customers towards success, or orient towards success in a better way. Service has kind of lacked a lot of those tools, and the reason why I think it has is because it's just a much harder physics problem, given the sheer volume of interactions that you get on that side of the business. So we deliberately tried to focus a little bit more on service than success, but I really see them as, two parts of that success equation overall, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes tons of sense. As you transitioned from the expert consulting, right, to the expert building and actually having to do it all yourself as the guy responsible for building the business, did you have any startup lessons learned as it relates to customer service or customer success, or we'll just call it all in on customer?
So, there's definitely lessons jumping from a consultant to a founder. I think that's a little bit more interesting, is that as a founder, I own that, what we were talking about. I own the success of a customer, right? That's a little bit different than being the guy who advises the guy who owns the success of the customer. So, in a lot of ways, you're in the pilot seat when you're a founder, right? And I think, it's one thing to advise a decision maker. It's another thing to really feel the pain on all sides of the business, right? Which is, okay, we have customers who need more and want more things. You also have employees that need to grow in their career and making sure that they're getting what they need to be successful in their jobs. So as someone in the, decision maker seat, it is a lot different than being a consultant. Now, there's a lot of great things that translate from the consulting world into running your own company. I think the biggest thing is really sticking to value, right? And I think, at the end of the day, a lot of what I did in my consulting role was really trying to figure out where's the value for both the enterprise and the end customer. So when we're working with big companies like, Google or Sprint or Microsoft, right? That's what you're trying to do. You're really trying to understand where's the win-win situation for both the enterprise and the end customer. And why I love customer service is that, those two things are not antithetical, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, if we're doing more, especially in the realm of service, to reduce the amount of effort that a customer has to put in to get an issue resolved, we essentially, are doing both the customer a favor because it's more effortless for them, as an experience, but we're also doing the business a favor because there's less operational resources that have to go into resolving that issue and serving that customer in the best possible way. And so, when those two things align, you have some really amazing things happen because, costs go down. You have more promoters, more people who are willing to recommend your business. You have generally more spend from the customers that are happier. So increase ARPU if that's a term that resonates with the audience. And then, things like, reduction in overall cost to serve, right? So those are all good things. For some companies that even, means revenue expansion just because of word of mouth and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ancillary benefits that come in with this. And we think that, service is playing a bigger and bigger part in that decision to, again, decide to, where do you want to put your money, right? If you have good service with the company, they're more likely to keep their money with that company and continue on that revenue stream. But something goes wrong, you're always at a threat for losing some of that revenue in the future and having that go to potentially a competitor.
Yeah, and a couple things just to pull out. So ARPU, super important metric, average revenue per user.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
no, average revenue per user. I'm sure a lot of people know, but it's easy to get caught up in the acronyms. And then also you mentioned the employee's role in this, right? And your role as a founder, not just setting up the customer for success, but the employee for success. So one thing that ties those together, which I think is just so important for you to give your insight on, is how do you find employees that are customer centric? How do you find employees? Because every employee should be a customer service person, right? At the end of the day, whether that's their job or not, they should have the eye of the customer in mind. So,
right. And I think
do you find those types? Yeah, go ahead.
I think when we interview, I think we relate to a lot of people because, at the end of the day, we're all customers of something, right? Yeah. Like I started this with, this affects everyone. And at the end of the day, if you're, a developer that's trying to work here or work with our biz dev or strategy or, user design, part of that is I really start interviews with putting that customer hat on, right? Trying to understand, hey, what frustrates you about the experience that you've had? Forget about serviceMob for a second. Who's your healthcare provider? United Healthcare? Who's your, airline? Delta? Like, tell me about an experience you had. What was the last one you had? Was it good? Was it bad? And oftentimes like that triggers, and I think this is probably true for a lot of people, some horror stories, some really tough, interactions that people have had to have with companies. Some of them are just bad interactions that waste a lot of time. Some of them are much more painful, much more personal, right? And I've heard of some of our employees have had, bad experiences with banks after, going through an identity theft, right? And, the worst thing that you want to see is, you open up your online banking account and all of a sudden, like, no money's there, right? And now you're going through and you're talking to 15 different departments to figure out. I mean, it's a scary thing for somebody. I've heard of, some really personal issues just around end of life, like you're trying to get benefits or trying to understand that. And, you're dealing with, poor chatbots, that are trying to give condolences to you. And it's like, what is this? Like, why am I talking to a robot here? Like, this is not the experience that we expect. So it's an interesting, the context of the interaction matters quite a bit. And part of what we try to do, is really, start from the experiences you had as just a customer who has to go through service, and then back that into, what would you do different? Yeah. How would you fix this? Now, if you were in charge, what would really happen here? Right. And, if we know what would really happen, okay, well, what do we need to do to really make that real? And oftentimes you'll see that, pretty much, and this is part of the thesis of serviceMob, but I try to see if a lot of the employees we hire really get to that point where they say, wow, what's really wrong with customer service is kind of the measurement aspect. There's that whole, that Peter Drucker quote, you can't improve what you can't measure. And a lot of what's wrong with customer service today is that there's a dearth of measurement. There's really just not a lot of things that, you're able to measure. There's a lot of dark data, in customer service where you can't really distill it into, real performance information. That's a very hard thing. And if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And I think, where we try to see if, a lot of our employees are led to is, hey, do you recognize that it's really hard to run this operation, right? Even though you may have had a bad experience, trying to understand it, if you owned it from the other side, it's going to be really hard to improve that experience if you don't ultimately have the data to show you where things are going right and where things are going wrong. And I think you get to that realization, then you realize, okay, there's probably a good fit for serviceMob, because, that's kind of central to our thesis. And, being in this, industry for decades, that's, one of the key insights. It's the reason why the chatbot doesn't really understand your problem. It's the reason why you have to wait 45 minutes at 10:30 on Tuesday, right? It's the reason why you have to talk to 5 people. It's the reason why, you have to call back again because, someone didn't really resolve your issue. All of that has to do with, at some level, limitations in data. Right. And if you are able to fix some of those things, you can dramatically improve the level of service that you provide to end customers. But without it, it becomes really hard. And I think that's the empathy that we have to have for, the operators that are doing this business day in and day out. It's a hard thing to just answer phones or respond to angry emails and angry customers all day who are just really mad, right? Yeah. That's a very stressful job at the end of the day to do. And so having empathy for that side of it, I think, is incredibly important. And knowing that, hey, look, the best thing that we can do for all sides of this equation, again, that win-win scenario, is better transparency of information. Because if you have that, now you can improve, where there's deficiencies. If you have that, now you can coach agents on the places where they really need coaching, right? If you have that, now you can have better automated workflows that allow for better service levels or better forecasting for, what we have to come in the future. Those are really important functions that exist today, but it's key to know that a lot of that is done on partial information, right? And the more that we can complete that picture and shine a light on that dark data, the better off these operations are going to be, the better off they're supporting their workforce in serving the end customer, and the better off customers are going to be in having a better experience. And so that's how we kind of bring it full circle, not with just our employees, but, also trying to figure out, okay, how can they also, keep in their minds and in their hearts those, call center operators who have to do this day in and day out, because that's where the whole business happens. That's that one interaction multiplied by thousands and thousands of contacts over many different channels. That's where the whole business happens. And so the more we can understand and show about that, the better off, the operation is, better off the end customer is, and the better off, we are in creating value as a company.
So awesome. Incredible things there, right there. Anuj. I mean, so many people make the mistake, especially as it relates to hiring and firing, or not having customer-centric employees, right? As you think about other mistakes, common mistakes that people make around customer service, what are the biggest things that you see, companies, especially, earlier stage companies making as it relates to customer service, and maybe one thing that they can do to solve for that?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that I see sometimes is like really trying to not understand some of the preferences of customers, right? I think it's really important that you understand the channel and mode in which a customer wants to operate in. If you offer something, you have to back that up, right? In other words, if I offer a phone channel, the worst thing that you can do is try to obfuscate that, right? And I see people do this. Like, why do we even offer this then, right? If we're trying to hide the phone number, if we're trying to, I've seen things where, folks try to purposely burn their queues to try to force them to go to different channels like chat and that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, that's going to hurt you on the top line. Maybe you save a few tickets, right? But at the end of the day, that may anger your customers to a point where they don't want to do business with you, because when they need that support, you have to be responsive, right? You have to be willing to, really help them correct that issue so that they can, do what they need to do in your products so that they're again successful. Right. And if they can't be successful, there's a time limit on how long they're going to keep you as a customer, right? Or how long they'll stay as a customer, for your product or service. So,
And
I think
whether
that's
they'll recommend you to other customers, right?
exactly. And then they'll go out there and, in this day and age, there's megaphones out there and Twitter and, Better Business Bureau. And there's all kinds of G2, it's one that comes to mind in business to business and B2B world where, people leave feedback and that feedback can burn. And that's feedback that people read to make decisions on whether or not they want to, invite you for an RFP or invite you to even audition for a sale, right? For against the need that a business has. And so, that's an important thing that, I think if you're planning to offer these things, try to really understand, what your customers want and how they want it, and then optimize for that. I think it's a little bit tough when you say, hey, look, we're going to offer the phone channel, but we really don't want anyone to use it. Right. It's like, then, in that case, I just wouldn't offer it to start with. Right. And there's going to be some folks that prefer that channel, some that prefer chat over phone and phone over chat, or, email even. So, there's all kinds of different ways to get in contact with companies. The other side of that is, trying to overdo it. I've seen this too. Right. So this idea of, when I think of this idea of omnivalent, right? We talk about omni-channel, I talk about omnivalent. And the idea of omnivalent is that you're not just trying to, offer any channel under the sun to interact with your company. What you really want to do is, balance this idea of preference and prescription. Right. So, to some level, you want to offer enough channels where, your customers can get in contact with you with relatively low effort. But at the same time, you don't want to offer channels that you can't really be you're not truly staffing the right way, or, you're not taking care of it in the way that, a channel or a mode to talk to a company should operate. One example that I can give you is, when Facebook Messenger came out, a lot of companies wanted to, put something out on Facebook Messenger. And, so that was a mode that you can get in touch with any kind of company. Now, when you message them on Facebook Messenger, if they didn't have someone on the other side really, making sure that those customers were taken care of via that channel, you're losing a lot of trust. And that's what I would notice, is that you would text someone and say, hey, I need help with this order. And, no response for 4 or 5 days. That's not taking care of the customer, right? So, you want to do this in a way that, in my opinion, where you can best service the customer. You don't want to offer so many channels that, hey, look, well, phone and chat are really the only real ways to get in contact with us, and these other ones don't really work. That will lose trust really quickly with your customer. But at the same time, if you do offer it, make sure that you staff it appropriately. Make sure you're treating it with respect, because your customers will find their way to those channels if you offer it.
They will. And that brings me to another really important thing that I'd love for you to weigh on, which is the role of social media evolution in this whole thing we call customer service, right? You touched on it around the channels, and you touched on it around, the employee experience around it, but like, what is life going to look like in a couple of years as it relates to customer service connected to social media, right? Are things evolving? How does that all come together as things evolve?
Customer service on social media is interesting, because you get that megaphone effect, and unfortunately there's a bias toward negativity. That's what the data shows us, right? Sometimes, there definitely, you'll get a good comment every now and then, hey, kudos to Jim, he really knocked out my issue. But most of the time it's like, hey, Jim, you really didn't do well on this issue, and I'm letting my 15,000 followers know, and now you're just getting a world of hate online. I think Delta Airlines just experienced this, right? I think it was interesting where somehow there was a tweet about, I've been on hold for 6 hours, right? Whatever. And I was talking to, someone who had the official Delta Airlines was like, they responded like, calm down. Like, this is a hard job. Calm down. Right. And that was not taken very well. Right. And then, eventually that got retweeted thousands and thousands of times. It made, some headlines. Like, they got picked up by Forbes. It was one of those things where that one event that normally would be, maybe not the best experience, but at least it would have been, kind of private, became very public very fast. Right. And, and I think like, that scares companies to some level, and that's why you've seen people try to hack the customer service system, because they're like, well, I don't want to wait on phone forever, and I don't want to use whatever chatbot they have, so I'm just going to scream online, and maybe that's a way I can get better service. So I don't know that it's changed a lot from there, but there is, what we're seeing more is that companies that are embracing this, they're trying to create, specific pages for support. And, oftentimes what they do is they'll take that case from a public channel and then try to move the conversation to a more private channel like email, or even in channel like direct tweeting or direct message or something of that nature. So I see it as a way to, it's something that scares companies, because you can get, for the wrong reason, you can become very famous quickly. Yeah. But at the same time, it's part of our society now, and it's an equalizer. I think, but you have to think of it this way, Jim. If there was an easy way to get service, like if you could go through the traditional channels and get service, why are they going to social media in the first place? Usually it's not the first place people go. It's after I called in 5 times. I chatted 8 times. They screwed me on this. It's after usually something really bad. I'd say 90% of the issues you see on social media that are bad are after customers have exhausted the traditional channels, which again goes back to my previous comment, is that if you have those channels, you got to treat those channels and those interactions with the proper care and respect that they deserve, because you're telling customers you could come in and contact us through these channels. You have to, properly staff those. You have to properly, resolve those issues. If you're not doing that, or you don't have the ability to do that, then you have to rethink your entire strategy, right? Because then what can happen very quickly is that you will become famous on social media for bad service.
Yeah. Yeah. Ain't that the truth? You see that more and more now, and whether they've exhausted other channels or not, I mean, you give customers the easy button and you make things easy for them. They tend to respond positively. You make things challenging, and now the world is easier than ever to make it more challenging for you as a business. So some really awesome points there. And that brings us to the next part of our show, which is called the Founder Five. And
Uh-oh.
here we go. Listeners know that this is just a series of 5 rapid fire questions, really all about you, Anuj, right? All about you, so that others can learn from you. And we try to get through these in a quick hit manner. So I'm just going to start laying them down for you, and you say what comes to mind. Sounds good?
Okay.
All right. So first is the number one metric or KPI that you are relentlessly focused on as a founder.
I think the number one KPI I'm focused on eventually is going to, everyone will say revenue or that kind of thing, something of that nature. To me, it's at the end of the day, it's got to link to impact. And I think eventually where we're going, as we expand our businesses, I always ask, how many agents, how many people are getting their data from ServiceMob? It's like for the 18 million agents that are out there in the world, I always like to think like, okay, how many of those are we servicing, right? How many of those agents are getting their data from us? And if we're able to expand that, then we're having more impact. So that's what I look at.
I love that. I'm surprised you didn't say ARPU though. Just given the awesome. All right, cool. Second question, top tip for growth stage founders like yourself.
I think the top tip is, stay in the game long enough to understand where the opportunities are in the space. I think as founders start off, there's enormous pressure to say, okay, we have, the perfect idea. Understand that, ideas are probably worth a dime a dozen, right? You have to execute on it, but you also have to test it out in the market, So I think part of it is staying around long enough in a specific space to really understand where the pain points are. What I call it is zeroing in on the pain points. Once you zero in on the pain point that I think is large enough, for I would say as a problem or a market inefficiency to go address. And then I think the other side of that is once you zero in on something that excites you, because I always say, use the 5-year rule. Could you be solving this problem for the next 5 years and be happy, or would you get sick of it after a week? I usually say, hey, look, if I could deal with this problem for 5 years, even if it's 1 year, even if it's 2 weeks, at least that you can go the distance, with this idea for a good amount of time. And then if you find that once you zero in on the problem, then it's how do we go from 0 to 1? How do we now productize a solution around a problem? The worst thing you can do is, come up with a solution that's looking for a problem to fix. And there's a lot of that, even though I feel like people say that so often, there's still a lot of solutions out there that don't have problems that are big enough or prevalent enough to be worth fixing. Yes. So I think that's what I would tell founders.
Stay in the game. I love it. That's a great tip, Anuj. And I would also say that ideas, while a dime a dozen, great ideas are hard to come by. As somebody who, finds and invests in great
That's
ideas
true.
myself. So execution, incredibly important. But if you've got a great idea, let's find a way to bring that to the world. So yes, stay in the game. Love it.
Yep.
All right, cool. All right, next one is favorite book or podcast or some medium that's helped you grow as a founder.
Yeah, there's a couple. Well, one that comes to mind is one of our early investors, has Mucker Capital. They have a great podcast called Blue Collar VC. Part of their, theory and part of, what I was talking about, stay in the game, a lot of that ethos, I think, comes from Mucker. They really, focus on this idea of not just product market fit, right? Because I think that term, we hear that a lot of times, but in my mind, and I think what that particular podcast does, especially when it's working with founders, they look at this as product, market, and team, right? And if you think of that as kind of a triangle, right? Each segment represents a certain fit that you as a company need to achieve at some point. So it's not just product market fit, it's also market team fit, right? Is this the team to address the market inefficiency? And then, team product fit. Is this the team to build the product that could, deal with that market efficiency? Yeah. So, team product fit, product market fit, team market fit, those are all things that at the end of the day, you need to have. And if you can nail those three, I think that's kind of the makings of a successful company, right? And I think the ethos of Mucker on that Blue Collar VC and a lot of the folks that they interview for that really go to the heart of that principle.
Yeah, I love that. And I know Mucker. I know Mucker well. I didn't know you were a portfolio company, so that's awesome, man. That's terrific. All right, cool. Here's a fun one. So if you had to pick an actor to play you in a movie, who would it be and why?
Well, if it was purely on looks, probably like George Clooney. I think Perfect. We look like. If I think of really good actors, I would hope that maybe it'd be like someone like Russell Crowe, like in Gladiator days, like something like that. Because I feel like that's what we're doing. I feel like as founders, we're always underdogs, right? And I'm reminded of that scene in Gladiator where it's like they're reenacting this old battle, and the whole point of it is that the slaves are supposed to lose and more or less die on that, like in that arena. Yet in this version of it, the slaves actually won, right? And the whole thing was by really sticking together, not trying to fight individually, because if you fight individually, you're pretty much dead. But if you fight together, and I think this is important for startup teams, you fight together, you stay together, you find that core group of believers that really tries to enact the mission of your company, then you might have that slight chance to win, right? Yeah. Defy the odds, defy history. Everyone would tell you that every business should fail, but statistically, starting a business is a failure of an endeavor. But why do we do it? We do it because that small chance of success, and for you to maximize that, you have to work together with a team. There's no one person that can really enact anything. I think all great things do happen in teams. And so you got to find that team, like we were talking about earlier, and really stick together, stick with them. And you'll be surprised at the odds that you can defy. You can rewrite history as a result of that.
Well said. I love it. All right, here's the last one. If you were to have an autobiography written of you at the end of your life, right? What would be the title?
Oh, wow. I don't know, The Long Way Home, or third and long, like the Anuj Bhalla story. I think for me, it'd be something like that.
Oh man, maybe fourth and long even.
Yeah, maybe fourth and out, right? But it's one of those things where I always see things as a challenge, right? And I think what's interesting is that statistically, using the football analogy, like on fourth down, you should always there's a conventional wisdom that you should always punt, right? Always punt the ball. But I think with some teams, with the right attitude, they were able to again defy the statistics and say, you know what, on fourth, go for it, right? Because what's the worst that can happen? There's a lot of times that you're going to overturn the possession, so to speak, in life. But I say, use all four downs, right? Use every bit of time you have to kind of advance the ball. Time goes by quickly, and you realize this as founders, you're like, oh man, it's already, end of July right now, right? Where did this year go? You have a limited amount of time to really, make something happen. So you got to use every second you have. And so, in that analogy, I'd say, on fourth down, go for it. As I think it's the founder's credo, go for it. Try to advance the ball, try to, live to fight another day, and, get that touchdown at the end of the day.
Maybe even go for two. Who knows?
Yeah. Go for
All
two.
right.
Yeah, definitely. Always.
Sean McVay way. All right. Awesome. So, you've given so much to our audience today, Anuj. So first off, thank you. And second off, just want to offer you a platform to maybe see if there's a way the audience might be able to help you. So, on that note, what are you looking for? Any goals that you've got that you really could use a little bit of support from others on, other founders?
Yeah, first of all, if you're a founder trying to figure out, okay, I've grown to a certain point, I need to figure out customer service. I need to figure out how to service our product so that they're happy, so that our end customers are happy, that is. Contact me, this is what I love doing, So I'll put that out there for anyone who needs advice on customer service. If you want me to take a look at some data, I have a no refusal of data policy as a data scientist. So I love looking at it. I love trying to help people understand things in it that they didn't see previously. That excites me. But on top of that, I think the bigger thing for us is, as founders, I think what I've seen time and time again is that founders are the best resource for other founders. And I'd say less about me, pay it forward as much as possible, right? There are founders that need your help. There are founders that could use an introduction to a customer, to an investor, to a potential partnership. Those are all important things. We all need help along the way. This is a lonely journey as a founder. So, I think the people who really understand what you're going through right now, and it could be a very hard journey, like roller coasters up and down every day. Try to find that group, try to reach out, try to help. And that's what I would offer to other founders out there. If you need help with something, if there's a way that I could be helpful in the future based on my background and experience, I'd like to always pay it forward. And I'd ask other founders really do that, because this is a hard journey. It is not easy to do this. And we need, frankly, I'll say it for everyone to say, is we need all the help we can get as founders to really enact that vision and really be, hopefully at the end of the day, successful with our enterprises.
Well, I got to say, you're the only guest so far who's ever dodged the question of how people can help you. Somehow turned it into helping others, which I love. But I'm going to re-ask the question because I'm not going to let you dodge. How can others help you?
Yeah, like I said, look, we're in the customer service analytics business, so we'd love to earn the business of others out there.
There we go.
If you are dealing with an operation right now and you want to have more visibility, and I think it's a good thing to do from the start. Doesn't matter if you're 10 agents or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, right? It's really important to have visibility so you can make better decisions, right? I think one of the best things I've ever heard is that businesses, and it's a truth to me. I think it's like, Newton's first law of enterprise, right? It's like businesses only move as fast as they can make decisions, right? And a corollary to that is, better data really enacts or really enables better decision making, right? So better data can help you make decisions faster, which can help move your business faster. And there's a real value proposition in what you're doing on the service side. And if you want to know more about that, definitely engage us. We want that. And anything, if there's investors out there that are interested in this problem, because I think, especially in this industry, right? And especially with, kind of current conditions, customer service is becoming more of a gateway to businesses. It's important to not just retaining customers, but also optimizing and controlling your costs. So from that standpoint, I think we have a very strong value proposition for companies. And if there's investors who are excited about that, and the types of companies, the many types of companies we're working with, from early stage startup to Fortune 500 enterprise, which represent the breadth of our customer base, then talk to us. We'd love to talk to you.
That's awesome. I'm so glad we were able to meet from that Forbes list, which I guess is how we got introduced originally. So you heard it here. What's the best way, Anuj, for people to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn, email?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is definitely great. If they mention this podcast, that'd be great. It's always good to have a little context on where they may have heard of us. Because I know inboxes can get clogged, but that helps you kind of get to the top of the queue. You mentioned Orchid Black, or you mentioned Jim, or anyone else, right? We could definitely make sure we get in touch with you. So
Perfect.
And I make sure that I respond. So that's the other thing. We won't leave you hanging.
Anuj Bhalla, we'll put a link in the show notes for all you guys as well. So thank you for joining us. This has been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully you have a wonderful rest of your week, brother.
Hey, thank you so much, Jim. Really fun to be here. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
You bet. All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.